Anything really from 4-room. That's what we call it. Is what we call that 4-room. That means a 3-bedroom, basically about 100-meter apartment. You go into 5 rooms, either on one floor or a duplex. That can be 6 rooms. And then we have sort of what we call mini cottages. Cottages a little bit bigger, freestanding villas that obviously carry a higher price. But there's a full range. I always say to people, really, once one knows one's budget and to build one's expectations in line with one's budget, then one won't be disappointed. Well, let's work backwards on those questions. I think to buy or to rent is essentially a personal decision. Obviously, most people will want to probably start if they're less familiar with the neighborhood, so the natural thing to do then is to take a rental apartment for a year, and then the problem is that doesn't really, if you're stuck on one side of town, it doesn't really help you learn the other side of town all that much. So really I suggest if someone has a base here, what I mean by that is friends who live here can explain the neighborhood. We just had a case recently. There was a family who were looking for something very specific in a rental. Ultimately they weren't finding it, so they ended up buying an apartment essentially through a WhatsApp video that I sent them, plus they got a friend to actually go and see the place as well. They came to Israel and signed on it a couple of days later, Baruch Hashem. But that's not the norm. I would suggest a pilot trip is a very sensible idea to do, to give oneself a week or so to really explore the areas. But every street has a different style as such. So really the more research one can do before one gets to Israel, the more productive it would be. As to the question of the realtor, that's a very important thing. The point of a realtor is there are websites, like you mentioned, where there are properties listed by the owner. However, one has to get a feel for the prices, and my experience, unfortunately, is that sometimes when people are listing themselves, in the same way they don't want to pay the agent's fee, they also want to try and get a high price from the buyer. So the point of a good agent is one who should have knowledge of all the properties that are for sale. I personally am connected with all the agents in town, so if a customer wants to work with me, I can take them to, if they tell me they're looking for so many rooms, a certain budget, a certain neighborhood, I can show them the full array of properties, because I work in conjunction with all other agents and their properties, to give the customer the widest possible selection of properties. How one finds, how does one get into it? So there's a very good email list, shemesh.co.il. One can subscribe there. There's also a Facebook page where I'm up at Shemesh. Some of us, we have our websites, whichever will come up first, I don't know. But essentially the choice of agent is an important thing. Someone who genuinely will take you to all the available properties, not just his own property. That's a very important point. Right, we aren't paid for our time, we're paid for closing a deal. Let's just speak a minute about what are the costs associated with housing. Essentially the main costs are, the agent's fee typically is 2% plus VAT, a lawyer typically takes 0.5% plus VAT, purchase tax, if it's a first property in Israel and one's made aliyah, then the first 1.6 million shekels is exempt. Then it's about 3% of the value above the 1.6 million shekels. If one has not made aliyah, it's important to know then there is an 8% purchase tax on the whole property, so take that into consideration. If one uses a mortgage broker, that typically they charge between 0.5% and 1% of the size of the mortgage. One can also go straight to the bank as well, but perhaps that's another discussion of pros and cons of that. One pays the property tax, that's called arnona. That's what we call in England a council tax for local services. It depends on the size of the apartment, how many square meters it is. There are discounts, I think, for Anglo Olim. And obviously there's electricity, water, gas. These things usually go on the tenant. The agent, there is an agent, if an agent finds a rental property, it's usually 1 month's rent. Finder's fee. Absolutely, the north is, I guess the more towards the centre of the country you are, the higher the prices are going to be, both for renting and for sale. The north, one can pick up an apartment under 1 million shekels for a nice 4-room, 800-900 even, 1,000 shekels I mean. as I said, the Ramat Beit Shemesh area, it's not quite as cheap as it once was. The main reason is because around the world, there is a focus and a high demand in Ramat Beit Shemesh with a fairly limited supply. So it is sometimes a bit of a search to get a person the property that they really like. The point is, one has to really be in touch with a realtor. It doesn't really work totally from overseas. At some point, one has to be in Israel, walk into a property, and make decisions accordingly. It could be one can come for a pilot trip, one may not find the exact thing, but at least the realtor will have a more firm idea of the direction. So it's not quite look in the catalogue and choose. I would say each agent typically deals with a specific area. However, we can certainly recommend good realtors in other areas who do specialize in the Moshavs, be it the north. I do have a number of connections all over the place, and there's lots of good agents out there as well if you can find a good one. The highest maximum selection according to what they're looking for. So for that we are connected to other agents who deal in the commercial side of things. As I say, they're very different specialist fields of activity with very different requirements, and so I find just sticking in with what I do in Ramat Beit Shemesh and the projects here is more than enough to try and really give people the best service that I possibly can. 972 for Israel, then 544-513-847, jsrealtyisrael@gmail.com or www.jsrealtyisrael.com. I'll be more than happy to hear from you if you're thinking of making Aliyah, and Mi'etz Hashem, seeing you in Eretz Yisrael soon.